Hello, Tubby and Coos fans. It's me, Candace, back at you again for another author event. I'm really excited today. We are launching The Dead and the Dark, which is as dead and dark as it sounds. And this book is written by Courtney Gould. And so she will be here today in conversation with Erica Waters. So I'm really excited. Happy book birthday to this book. Hooray. And Courtney, who is the author of this book, writes books about queer girls, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night. So, all of these things are close to my heart. She graduated from Pacific Lutheran University in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in creative writing and publishing. Born and raised in Salem, Oregon, of all places. This is so cool. She now lives and writes in Tacoma, Washington, where she continues to write love letters to the haunted girls and rural empty spaces. The Dead in the Dark is her debut novel. And Courtney will be in conversation with Erica Waters, who grew up in the pine woods of rural Florida. So a Southern person like me, though she now resides in Nashville, Tennessee. She has a master's degree in English and works as a university writing tutor. When she's not writing books, you can find her hanging out with her two dogs, Nutmeg and Luna, which I love. I have a cat named Luna, so there we go. We're pet siblings here. Her debut novel, Ghostwood Song, was a Bram Stoker Awards finalist and was nominated for YALSA's 2021 list of the best fiction for young adults. Her forthcoming books include The River Has Teeth and The Restless Dark. So I'm really excited to have both of them with us today. We're going to kick this off with Courtney reading, I believe, the prologue of the book so that you can get a feel for what this book is all about. So welcome to Courtney and to Erica, and I'm so excited to hear you read and to hear y'all have this conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Candace, for having me, and thank you so much, Erica, for joining me. I am so
delighted.
Yes, I'm so excited to be launching The Dead in the Dark today. It feels like it's been coming forever. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and read the prologue. So it begins with an interlude. For the first time in 13 years, it snows in Snakebite. The snow is a gentle thing, lilting like dust on the early January wind, coating the rocks along the Lake Oahe shore in thin slush. The lake water is black and seeps like ink into the snow-hazy sky. It is nighttime, the people of Snakebite warm in their homes, fingers pressed to their windows while they nervously watch the snow fall. For a moment, the world is silent. It is only the wind and the shifting trees and the hushed pulse of water against stone. It is held breath. A boy stumbles to the lake shore. He thinks he is alone. He holds his hands in front of him, palms up as though the snow is only a figment of his imagination. Flecks of it stick to his eyelashes, in the navy netting of his basketball shorts, in his hair the color of the golden hills that border town. He pauses at the water's edge, looks out at the horizon, and sinks to his knees. He is far from home, far from the light, far from anything. The dark watches the boy. It is tucked into the body of a new host, staggering across dead grass and juniper boughs for a better view. This new body is unwieldy to the dark. It will take time to adjust to this skin, to these eyes, to the anxious beating of this new heart. What are you afraid of? The dark asks, quiet as the whispering wind. You have a plan. Act. The host tenses. His fingers are clenched at his sides, lips pressed together, eyes wide. He is a wild animal frozen in fear. Something's wrong, the host whispers. Why is he on the ground? Does it matter? I don't know. The host does not move. What do I do? Go, the dark breathes. The host nods. He inches from behind a thick juniper trunk, standing closer to the boy, just out of sight. The boy does not notice, does not move. Through the flickering snowfall, the boy's face is tear-streaked, red with grief, hollow. He stares out at the black horizon, but he stares at nothing. The host hesitates again. The boy pulls a cell phone from his pocket. The glare of the screen washes over his face, the only light in the unending dark. He taps at it and then stares at it in silence. Tears are still wet on his cheeks, rivulets of white light. All at once, the host is overtaken with the idea of marching forward, grabbing the boy by his collar, pressing thumbs to the column of his throat. He feels skin under his fingertips, the tangy scent of iron mixing with the snow. For years, he has imagined this. He pictures death running through him like a current. As quickly as he imagines it, he chokes the vision. The dark has dealt with this kind of hesitation before. It slithers through the host, coiling around his heart until it finds the black rot of hate it knows well. This host craves death. The desire has bubbled under his skin for as long as he can remember, but he has been too afraid to claim it as his own. Do you want me to help you? The dark asks. Do you want me to make you strong? The host scowls. I do. It is the truth. Then do this, the dark breathes. It simmers in the shadows, the water, the sky. It is the truth you have been hiding from all these years. The truth, the host whispers. He clenches and unclenches his fists, fingers fidgeting at his sides. A silent moment passes, and then another. And then the host moves. By the time he crosses the distance to the boy, the snow is falling in heavy sheets. The sky is a blur of gray, closer than it should be, stifling. The host grabs the boy, and there is no going back. The boy's eyes catch the host's for a moment, flashing from sorrow to surprise to recognition. He does not scream. Above them, the sky is gray, then black, and then nothing. The dark slides deeper into the host, sinks its claws in, roots itself in the rot. After 13 years, the dark has finally come home. And that is the prologue to The Dead and the Dark.
Thank you for reading that. That was beautiful and eerie and creepy and tense and wonderful, which is everything that the book is.
Thank you very much.
Of course. So I'm so excited to come and get to talk to you about The Dead and the Dark. Before we dive into the content of the book, I just want to ask, how are you? How are you enjoying debut day? How does it feel to have your book out in the world? How's that feeling?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It froze for a moment. Debut day has been very wild so far. I woke up this morning, posted a couple things on Twitter, went back to bed, and then woke up and everything had exploded. It's been really, really crazy the whole day. I feel like it's just been pictures of the book and people talking about the book and me just sort of trying to wade through all of it. But it's been really amazing to see people finally engaging with this thing that I've been working on since 2018. It's, it feels just from another planet to have people actually picking up the book, telling me that they really enjoyed the book, engaging with certain plot points that have felt sort of private to me for so long. It's been a really amazing thing.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And do you have any celebratory plans? What are you going to do to kind of once the chaos is over, what are you going to do?
I've purchased a fancy bottle of champagne for tonight, and I have a reservation at a restaurant that seems way too fancy for me, where they have said that they'll have the garlic bread ready when I get there, which feels like the fanciest thing that has ever happened to me. So I am very, very excited for that. Other than that, it's just going to be taking time off of work and just trying to really relax and sort of soak it all in. It's been really, really amazing, but very, it's like a lot happening all the time.
Definitely. Absolutely. All right, great. Well, let's dive into the content of the book. So first of all, how do you like to, when you give someone like your elevator pitch or you tell them what the book is about, how do you like to describe it?
Absolutely. I think The Dead in the Dark is a story about two girls, one who is the daughter of TV ghost hunters, who's never had a place she can really call home, who's traveled the road her entire life and has been following in her father's footsteps, regardless of whether or not she believes in the work that they do. And she follows them back to their childhood hometown in Snakebite, Oregon, when teens are beginning to go missing and they're trying to get to the bottom of any potential supernatural interference. While she's there, she meets Ashley, who is a longtime Snakebite resident who is the daughter of the most influential family in town, and who has always felt like she had a home in her hometown. She's never felt out of place before. She's never felt like she had anything different about her until her boyfriend goes missing, and he's the first of the teens to disappear. And she feels that she is the only one looking for him until Logan comes to town. The people of Snakebite are skeptical of outsiders. They're skeptical of anybody who's different. And when Logan and her fathers arrive, they are immediately ostracized, and one of her fathers is believed to be the person behind the disappearances. So Logan and Ashley need to work together, Logan to clear her father's name, and Ashley to find her missing boyfriend and get everything back to normal, how she remembers it. But in working together, they discover a lot of secrets about their town, about their families, and about their connection to each other that really complicate that goal. And the further they dig, the more that Ashley and Logan realize that they have a stronger connection with each other than they first imagined. And when a romance blooms between them, everything sort of goes into chaos. And it is spooky and supernatural, but it also touches on a lot of real world, small town issues that I think are really resonating with people.
Yes, I would agree. I've seen so much love for this book already. Everywhere I turn, someone is yelling about The Dead in the Dark and how good it is. And you've gotten amazing trade reviews, your Goodread reviews. I looked at them. They're fantastic. You don't need to look at them. I looked at them for you.
I don't look at them.
They're beautiful.
I don't see them.
So yeah, I agree. I loved this book. I read an early copy of the book, and I felt so lucky to get to be able to do that because I loved it so much. And something I've always wondered about is some of your inspirations for the book. Where'd you get the idea for The Dead in the Dark? Did it come from one place or from several places?
Yeah, I think that the inspiration for The Dead in the Dark was sort of a piecing together of a couple of different things that inspired me. I had gone on a trip out to Eastern Oregon, where there are not so many towns. It's very few and far between. It's a lot of desert area, which is what a lot of people don't really associate with Oregon. And I remember while I was out there, I was just getting this feeling, this sort of liminal space feeling out in Eastern Oregon. These towns were so isolated, and it felt like everybody was so loyal to each other and so skeptical of everything on the outside, which was something that I felt was a really unique point of view to the sort of small town life. And I really wanted to write a story set in a town like this, where I wanted to examine that sense of loyalty to the town and the sense of skepticism of anything on the outside, and how that would other people and how that would build a community that is sort of reliant on the exclusion of certain people. And then I think I've always loved everything paranormal. I think anything spooky, ghosty, like urban legends, monster type of things has always been really interesting to me. I love the idea of merging speculative stories with real problems. And so I really wanted to tell a story about this sort of small town attitude and the homophobia and other bigotry that can build up in these small towns, and connect that to something paranormal and supernatural. And then, of course, it was always going to be something sapphic because I am who I am, and that's what I always write. But I had this sort of sense of this insider-outsider narrative, and these two girls who are on opposite sides of this town who have to work together. And it has my favorite trope, which is enemies to lovers. And so I feel like once I really sat down to outline it and then write it, all of these things that I love so much just came together in a way that made drafting The Dead in the Dark really, really fun, actually.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. So speaking of drafting, what was your writing process like for this book? Or what kind of, did it come to you easily? Did you have to work really hard at it?
So when I first got the idea for Dead in the Dark, I was still in the middle of revising the book that I had written before this. And it was something that I was trying to put off writing anything of Dead in the Dark until I had finished revising this other book. but I was just so tempted by it. So it was around the end of 2018 that I finally decided I was going to outline the whole thing and I was just going to write it. And it was, I think, October to about January 2019 that I was writing the book. And then, I'm usually an outliner, and I still had a pretty strict outline for this book, but I've never had a drafting process like this before where I felt like the story really took over and I just had a lot of fun writing it. I was really getting into the characters, into the plot. I felt like I was sort of letting each scene take me where it took me. And it was something that made it very fun to write and also relatively easy to revise, because I was still really happy with what I'd written when I was done with it. So I wish every book was like that, but we can't be so lucky.
No, we rarely are. So one of the things that grabbed me the most about this book was the strong sense of setting. So when I blurbed your book, I wrote that Snakebite, Oregon feels so alive you won't believe it isn't on a map. And so how'd you pull that off? Like, how did you make this setting so concrete and tangible? And I think I'll remember the setting forever. Like, what was that like? How'd you put that together?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for that. It was really sort of a merging of a couple of different towns that I'd been to. I wanted to sort of pull concrete details from different places I'd been so that I felt like it really had a strong foundation as a setting. When speaking about something like small town bigotry, I never wanted to feel like I'm making a caricature of a small town or that it feels like I'm making fun of the people there, because I know that there are lots of people who live in these small towns who don't feel like they're doing anything wrong, or there are queer people who live in small towns, people of color in small towns who face that bigotry like on a smaller scale within their own community there, and it can be really, really othering. And so I didn't want to make it seem like the people of this small town were just these sort of cartoonish, like homophobic small town people. I really wanted to get into the meat of these Eastern Oregon small towns that I'd been to and try and ground it in something realistic. And so there were a couple of them that I went to that I was like, I'm going to make sure that it has, the population of this kind of place so that I know how the high schools are and how how many churches are they going to have. And I wanted to make sure that it would feel, if this place is isolated from other towns, I kind of would base it on that. And I wanted the attitudes in Snakebite to also be part of the setting of Snakebite itself. I wanted there not to be like one concrete way that everybody treated queer people. I wanted it to really feel like there was a range, because not everybody in these small towns is going to have the same reaction to this otherness that they are so afraid of. Some people are going to, be more passive, and some people are going to be more actively hateful. And that's something that I wanted to try and capture. And I feel like that was sort of the key thing to making the setting feel like it came to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So there's so many things that I know we want to talk about. I think probably one we both want to talk about the most is the romance in the book. We both write sapphic romance.
Of course.
And so let's talk about Logan and Ashley. What was writing them like? What does that relationship mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was at one point a secret, and now not so much, that the inspiration for Logan and Ashley actually came from the strangest, worst place, which was watching Riverdale. I watched the first season of Riverdale, and I remember thinking Betty and Veronica should be together, just hands down. And that dynamic was something that was really sticking with me. This sort of cynical and snarky but lonely girl who's new to town, who has had a lifestyle that nobody in town is even vaguely familiar with. And then you get this sort of all-American small town girl. She's grown up in the same place. She's never even really been anywhere else. She's popular in her own community, and that's enough for her. Always lives up to the expectations of the people around her and doesn't really have any desire to be anywhere else. And I wanted them to really set off or be catalysts in each other's stories. I wanted Logan to teach Ashley that maybe the place she's from isn't as perfect and great as she always thought, and maybe there are things that need to change, even if it means upsetting the place she's always loved. And I wanted Ashley to teach Logan that she can open up, that there is somebody who is there for her, and that she can find home even if it's not in a place, with a person. And that was something that was super fun to explore. I don't even know which part was more fun for me, writing the sort of antagonism at the beginning where they were just brats to each other all the time. They didn't get along and they didn't want to. And then that slow development into realizing that maybe they're the only ones who are understanding each other, and maybe they can only trust each other. And then coming to the end where they realize that those feelings are not something that they can ignore, and that maybe they can both try and find a medium in their lifestyles with each other.
So you describe their romance as enemies to lovers. Do you see it also as kind of an opposites attract sort of trope, or what do you feel like they're really different from each other, or that they have more in common than meets the eye?
I think they do have more in common than meets the eye. I think for Logan, the things that she's desiring are more at the surface of what she thinks about. She knows she wants a home, and she knows she doesn't feel good in the situation she's in, that she feels lonely. I think Ashley feels the same things, but has sort of shoved that down so far that she feels like her life is perfect as it is, because she isn't really willing, at the beginning of the book anyway, to confront the things that she's not happy with in her life. You know, she's not feeling her relationship that she's in. She's not feeling this connection to her friends like she used to. She is feeling lonely and isolated, but is sort of staunchly swallowing that feeling so that she doesn't have to confront what it would mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So writing this kind of enemies to lovers romance, was that, I mean, you said it was fun, but was it challenging, like kind of pacing that out, like deciding when do they move from this stage to this stage to this stage? Was that challenging?
It definitely can be. I think I was helped in this case because it was these dual perspectives, so I was able to sort of flesh out the romance on one side for Logan and then do it from the other side for Ashley. But it definitely is difficult plotting it out and deciding, you know, is it too fast for them to start to feel safe with each other at this point? When we were going through edits for the book, actually, there was some definite changes in the pacing of their relationship. We made it a little bit of a slower burn, which I ended up really loving and appreciating, and I'm so glad that we changed it. I can't even imagine going back to having them start to hit it off toward the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I like the enemies to lovers aspect of it, and I like that we got to spend more time with that. I never want it to feel like, especially I think in Logan's case, where she's so skeptical of the people in this town, and she's so skeptical of the way that they feel about her. It feels natural to me that it would take her almost the entire book to feel like she could open up like that to Ashley.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that a lot. Like writing, I did also an enemies to lovers romance, and The River Has Teeth. In my case, it was so slow burn that my editor's like, can we see some actual romance, a little chemistry? Give us something, Erica. So she had to really push me to speed up the slow burn a little bit.
What I'm hearing is that we need to write an enemies to lovers romance together. Then it'll be the right pacing.
Yes, I love that idea. So, okay, if this is not too spoilery of a question, I'd love to know what's your favorite romantic moment in the book between Logan and Ashley?
Ooh, that's tough. I think my favorite romantic moment, there's a scene, I think it's about the 2/3 mark. It is the motel scene. And it is a moment where the investigation isn't going well. Ashley's in a tiff with her friends. Logan's gotten in a big fight with her dads. They're both feeling totally isolated. And Ashley ends up, because Logan, over the course of the novel, is staying in the town motel with her dads. And Ashley ends up coming over, and it's the first time that they hang out without thinking about investigating the disappearances and working together on, you know, being detectives. They just, Ashley comes over because she just wants to talk to somebody who isn't going to be upset at her or isn't going to tell her that she's wrong for looking into the case. And they have this moment where they connect on a level that they haven't before in the book. And it is, I think, my favorite moment between the two of them. I think it's what really establishes it as a romance at that point, instead of just like some fleeting feelings.
I remember that scene. And yeah, that was a really, really good scene.
Definitely my favorite, I think.
So someone from the audience asked this question, which I actually already had ready to ask you. So we all want to know, are you more of a Logan or an Ashley? Or do they have aspects, both of them, of your personality?
That is such a good question. I think that they're both pretty different from me. I think had an easier time writing them because they're so different from me. But I think if I was to pick between the two of them, Ashley is much closer to how I am as a person. I think she tends to be a little bit more passive and a little bit more of a peacemaker, sometimes to a fault, where she just wants everything to be totally fine and non-confrontational and can tend to erase the things that she needs or the things that she knows are right just to sort of save face and make peace in a conversation. Logan is a person, and on the other hand, who has a really, really strong sense of right and wrong, and also is never, ever afraid to point out what she thinks is right and wrong. She always says what she feels, which is something that I really wish that I had. When writing her, I was kind of thinking, what would I want to say here? And that made it really fun to write her. I think I had an easier time writing her, even though she was less like me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does. So while we're talking about these two characters, if I remember correctly, one of them has some pretty strange snack habits. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? And did that come from you?
They fortunately did not come from me. I have not tried them. I kind of had this idea in my head that for my launch, I would have them. If we were like doing an in-person launch, I would have the snacks ready to go so that people could sample them. But Logan has her staple depression snacks that she always has if she's in a bad mood, and she holes up in her motel room and she watches Judge Judy, and she eats it is Cheese Whiz with bananas, vanilla ice cream with soy sauce, and potato chips that have been soaked in pickle dip or pickle juice so that they're soft, which they all sound pretty disgusting to me.
Yeah.
When I was coming up with what she was eating, I searched Reddit for what's the most disgusting snack that you eat regularly. And these were my favorite answers. So I stole them from
fantastic.
people who actually do eat them.
Wow. So there are people out there right now eating those snacks. That's
disgusting.
terrifying.
I think I would maybe try the ice cream with soy sauce because the salt and sweet, maybe. I could imagine a world where it would work, but I would never choose it. So
I think the soaked chips is the one that really got me. Like chips soaked in. I don't know about that one. Okay.
I remember when I first sent it to a critique partner, she was thinking, oh, that's not so bad because pickles and chips go well together. And I was like, no, they're soaked. They're like soggy. It's disgusting. So.
That's fantastic. Okay, so we've talked about the romance, which we love, love, love. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the other sort of big type of relationship in the book, which was between parents and children. So there's a lot of really uneasy parent-child relationships in the book. So you've got Ashley and her mom, and then you also have Logan with her dad, Brandon, having these kind of difficult, challenging relationships. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I think for me, the parent-child relationships in this book are sort of other than the main romance, I think the meatiest aspect of the book, they are what I sort of based the emotional arcs around. Logan has had this very uneasy relationship with her dad, Brandon, ever since she went on the show at one point to fill in for her other father, Alejo. They were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they were doing an episode, and halfway through the episode, there's an incident where Logan believes that her dad didn't want her around, and their conversations and all of their interactions after that are really stilted and really awkward. And so she's come to believe over the years that while Alejo is happy to have her there and is happy to interact with her and socialize with her, Brandon is not, and that he doesn't actually like having her around, even though he's her dad. And so she is sort of in this position where she feels like once she turns 18, she can just hit the road and make a space for herself because she doesn't feel welcome in her own home situation. And obviously over the course of the book, that relationship is explored, some of the reasons for that awkwardness and the reasons for that that really intense incident all those years ago are explored, because I really wanted to get into this idea of the parent-child relationship and what a parent would do to protect their child, but at the same time, what a parent owes to their child as their parent. And it's a tough situation for both of them. And I really enjoyed exploring it, even though it made me sad. Ashley, on the other hand, her mom has always been in her life, has always been very involved in her life, sometimes to the point of being perhaps a helicopter parent over her only child. But Ashley has always felt this sort of conditional support from her mom that, as long as she's doing everything right and she's following in her mom's footsteps, and as long as she's set up to take over the family industry, that she will be all good in her mom's eyes. And it's theirs is a tough relationship to explore as Ashley deviates further and further from this ideal daughter that her mother wants. Their relationship can get really tough, and they have to have some conversations they've never had before. And it really just shows, are they going to come out on the other end of this stronger, or are they going to break apart at that stress? And theirs was one. I think their interactions changed quite a bit through edits. I wanted to make sure that Tammy, Ashley's mom, was a character who felt nuanced and thorough, but also familiar to people. And I think in her relationship with Ashley, I was able to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did such a good job of looking at those difficult relationships and making them feel really nuanced and complex. That was one of the things that I really liked about the book. Another thing I liked about the book was this kind of overarching theme of home that you put in here. In so many different ways, you explored ideas of home, concepts of home, especially the idea of finding home in places or people that you maybe didn't expect. And I wondered if you might want to talk about that a little bit. It seemed like it felt pretty important to you as the author.
Absolutely. It was definitely the theme that by the time I was done going through all the different drafts of the book, it was the thing I kept coming back to, was this idea of home. Both the idea of who's able to feel at home certain places and who isn't. I wanted to explore that in Snakebite. There are people who have lived there for generations and who have felt very safely at home. And then you have people like Brandon and Alejo who are from Snakebite and who weren't made to feel like it was home. And that's a really difficult thing for somebody, because if the place that you're from doesn't want you to call it home, then where can you call home? And so I really wanted to explore this sense of finding other people, whether it be family or friends or finding a romantic partner, somebody who makes you feel comfortable in who you are and makes it so that you don't have to apologize or defend who you are to them. And then that can be its own version of home, because we can't always rely on the place that we're from to love us unconditionally. But we should be able to have people in our lives who are able to do that. And I wanted to really, through both Logan and Ashley's storylines, but also in like Brandon, Alejo, and Tammy's storylines, I wanted to explore that idea of finding and establishing that home and finding your people.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. Like, we've talked about the romance, we've talked about family, so all these excellent themes. but we haven't talked enough about the scary stuff, right? Like this book.
The spooky.
I don't want our listeners to think that this is just like a nice, sweet book. Like this book is scary. I read it for the first time when I was staying at a cabin in the woods. And there's actually like a picture of me that my spouse took with the like book up over my face. And I'm just looking over at him like, was just slightly terrified. So I definitely got creeped out by this book and found it scary and loved the kind of thrills and chills of it. And so I'd love to hear more about kind of, did you ever creep yourself out while writing this? Or, you know, do you have any like kind of real life ghost stories that fed into this? Let's hear more about the paranormal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I didn't really, nothing in the book was something that really scared me. There are actually a couple of scenes that were in the first draft of the book that ended up not making it to the final cut, which was for the best because they didn't really have any plot relevance and they were just there to be scary. But they were things where I was really trying to creep myself out. And so there was some more of, I have a trigger warning list on my website and it's at the front of the book, but there is a certain scene in the book that involves being buried alive. And that was a much longer thing in the original draft and more frequent. And I am probably glad that we cut that down. But
I am too.
I really creeped myself out with that one. And it was on purpose because I was like, if it's scary to me, it'll be scary to other people. There was actually a piece that we added toward the end of revisions where Ashley's out. It's toward the beginning of the book, but Ashley's out. She's doing a search party for Tristan, her boyfriend, and she's sort of spacing out. And then she, her vision comes into focus and she sees something she's definitely not supposed to. And that was, I think, for me, one of the like scarier moments at the beginning of the book, because we really wanted to make sure that nobody went into it thinking it was going to be just a standard thriller and then got scared halfway through and realized it's horror. So we started threading some of those scares in earlier in the book, and writing them, I was like, oh, this is really creepy. This is going to be spooky. As for my own ghost stories, I don't have many. I think the only thing, and I'm sure that I have family watching this who remembers this. I remember I was coming home from New Year's one day, and it was like 1 a.m, and I was driving, and I stopped at the stop sign before my house, and I looked, and there was like a black cat next to the car, and so I was kind of staring at the cat just because I love cats. And I looked back at the house, and there was a girl just standing in my yard, just staring straight at me. And it was so scary. And I don't even remember really like what she was wearing. I just remember she was staring right at me. And I looked back for a really long time because I was hoping that it would, you know, I would realize I was not looking at a person. I was looking at something else. And it didn't go away. And so I drove to the local 7-Eleven and called my mom and told her there was a person in our yard. But when she looked, there was nobody there. And so I don't know if that was just a person who got scared because I put my headlights on them, or if it was a ghost, but it really stuck with me because I'm still thinking about it now. So
yeah, I think I'm going to be thinking about it now too. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Logan's dads have a ghost hunting show, which was something I loved about this book, and that we got to see kind of excerpts from it, sometimes like the transcript. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about like why you chose to include this sort of ghost hunting paranormal show. And also, is that something you're a big fan of? Do you really like paranormal TV?
I love ghost hunting shows. My primary ones would be Ghost Adventures, which takes itself very seriously, and BuzzFeed Unsolved, which does not take itself very seriously. I think a lot of times they investigate the same locations with two very different tones, which I really appreciate. And I think Paraspectors, which is the show that Logan's dads host, is, I think, a happy medium between the two. It's corny and they take themselves very seriously on the show, but they're also kind of goofy, and they play off of each other, and they're insufferable. So I think that it's a merging of the two tonally. I really wanted to incorporate this ghost hunting show as part of the reason that Logan is such a skeptic when the book starts. She's seen her dad's following ghosts all over the country, busting things that she's pretty sure don't exist. She watches the show and she thinks this is all just bad special effects and overacting on my dad's parts, because I know that they don't act like this at home. And so it lends itself to this skepticism, but it also gave me the opportunity to really explore the lore of ghosts, because I had both of her dads as experts on the paranormal. They know how to use all the gear. They've been all over the place, and they've seen some really wild paranormal things. And so I think having them around, whether or not they're willing to provide information, it gave some validity to the hauntings, because it says there is actually something here that they're looking into. And Logan has to dig in and figure out what it is, because she doesn't believe it's the paranormal. But if it's not that, she has to figure out what it is.
Yeah. And what about the dark? Like, it was such an interesting sort of, supernatural element and kind of villain for the story. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, creating that part of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't get too much into the origins of it or sort of the actions that it takes, but I wanted to have this presence in the book that would be able to pop in every couple of chapters to let us know what it's trying to do with Snakebite, because Logan has a goal here and Ashley has a goal here, but the Dark is also a perspective character in the novel, and the Dark has its own goal in Snakebite and its own things that it wants to accomplish. I wanted to have this entity that represents all of the worst of Snakebite, all of the things that people either try to ignore or they enable by just being passive. I wanted the Dark to be something that comes from the very concept of this small town. I wanted them to feel sort of inextricable, that they are one and the same in the end. The Dark is a creature that doesn't really have a shape, doesn't really have a form. It's not visible to the characters. And so they're not able to just go find it. They're not able to catch it or hunt it down or even really know what it is. I think for the majority of the book, Logan and Ashley don't even know what they're looking for, because the Dark is something that exists really only in the host that it is occupying. And so for them to find it, they would have to know that it exists, and they don't. And so they end up sort of scrambling, looking for something that its very purpose is to hide from them.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it was spooky to write.
Yes, and spooky to read. Like I really felt like you pulled it off. You made it scary. You made it believable. It was so good. And it also felt like thematically heavy. You know what I mean? Like it carried the weight of kind of, I think, what you were trying to do with the story as a whole. Okay,
yeah, so I never want the. Oh, go ahead.
No. Keep going.
I was gonna say, I always want the theme and the characters and the monster. I want them to all feel like they're in the same conversation. And I feel like the more I was writing the Dark, the more it's really settled into that space and tied everything together in a way that was terrible and also really kind of fun to write.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one thing, because I mean, you and I write really similar sorts of books, right? We both write these kind of murder mystery, paranormal, sapphic kind of thriller kind of books. Yes. And the one thing that my agent, Lauren Spieler, is always asking me is like, Erica, what is the magic of metaphor for? Which you could take too far, right? You could really like get cheesy with it. But it's such a good question to me. It's like, what am I trying to accomplish with this like supernatural or magical element in the book? And I love books where, not that it's like hitting you in the face, like here's my theme, but that you get kind of the emotional and thematic thrust of the book through the magical or the supernatural elements. So that's one thing I definitely loved about The Dead in the Dark. So we're starting to get questions from the audience, and So I have a couple here, and I wanted to let the audience know, if you have questions you want to ask Courtney, this is your chance. So please go ahead and type those questions in, and we will answer as many of them as we can get to in the time we have left. Okay, so one of our lovely audience members would like to know, do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find?
That is such a good question. And I feel like I've never really had the forethought to do like Easter eggs, but I did really enjoy grounding a lot of the setting in actual rural Oregon. And I really wanted people who live in Oregon to sort of feel like they know this town. And so I had like the lake is a real lake. Lake Oahe is in Eastern Oregon. And it is shaped like a snake. There's just no towns on it, but I wanted to have sort of these feelings like the Bates Motel is a real motel that's out in another town in Eastern Oregon. Just these little bits and pieces so that people who have traveled in the area will feel like, oh, this is a town that would actually exist in this area. And that was something that I really enjoyed doing, because I have heard from a couple of readers that were asking, oh, is this named after this? And it was, and it felt very satisfying that somebody was able to grab that.
I love that. Yeah, I kind of do similar things in my writing too. I like sprinkling those little things in that only the people who live in that area are going to pick up on. That's really fun. Okay, another reader would like to know, were there any major name changes, either the characters or the ghost hunting show?
Yes, there was. So the characters all primarily stayed the same for their names. But the ghost hunting show did change names. It was originally called Wine and Spirits. And my editor, who is lovely and a genius, said that sounds like a talk show where they drink and talk about ghosts, which is true. And so we changed the name so it would feel more like it's an actual ghost hunting show. But I do think very fondly of Wine and Spirits as the previous name for the show, because it was really fun.
I love that. Did you know that there actually is a spooky supernatural podcast called Spirits, and they make alcoholic drinks during the show that they drink while they talk about that whatever the spooky concept of the day is. So it might not be.
I did not know, so I have to find it.
But a variant of that is out there somewhere. Okay, so, Rachel said, I think your next book should feature, oh, I missed the rest of it though, should feature that talk show. Okay, so your readers want Wine and Spirits.
All right, that would be the spin-off, is after the events of Dead in the Dark, Paraspectors will convert to only a talk show. And no more ghost hunting. I think they'll all be happier.
I love that. Excellent spin-off. Okay, let's see. What else have we got from the audience? What are you working on next? How is it the same as the Dead in the Dark? How is it different?
Yeah, so my next book that is coming out, it's going to be in late 2022. It's called Echo Sunset, and it is another young adult standalone, slightly supernatural thriller. This one is about a girl and her sister who, after their mother has passed away, they decide to travel down to a small town in Arizona that she was really obsessed with in life. She was an investigative journalist, and her life's work was writing a story about this small town, but she never got to finish it. And so they travel down to this small town in Arizona, trying to figure out what it was that she was so caught on in this town. When they get there, they realize that everything works different in this town. The people act very strange. Everybody defers to this one central leader. Everything is very eerie and upside down. And they have to figure out what's happening here, what it had to do with maybe their mother's downfall, and how they're going to get back out. And it is another sort of thriller. It features a lesbian main character and a female-female relationship at the core. This one I've really enjoyed. I think that the horror is a little more upfront in Echo Sunset, which I've really enjoyed. I've felt more at liberty to make things a aggressively off, versus Snakebite, which had to have the facade of a very normal small town. The town in Echo Sunset does not come off like a normal small town at any point in time. I've also really enjoyed exploring a sibling relationship in Echo Sunset. The main character is there with her younger sister. Neither Logan or Ashley had any siblings in The Dead in the Dark, so I didn't really get to go into this sibling relationship. But I have 2 siblings in real life, and I really think that sibling relationships can be, so nuanced and so emotional, and I've really enjoyed incorporating that into the new book. And that's something I've always actually really appreciated about your books too, is that sibling relationship that always feels like this driving force, because it really is such an important bond, and one that is really irreplaceable.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. I love writing sibling relationships. You can just do such interesting things with them. So I'm very excited to read Echo Sunset.
Oh.
Okay, so we have a few more questions. Why did you decide to write horror, and specifically why queer horror?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really enjoy horror because I feel like it's inherently so emotional. I think that in order to make people really afraid, you have to create these big stakes and this investment in your characters, so that people are really afraid of what might happen to them because they're very invested in them. I think horror is a great way to examine the things that we believe about the world around us and the things that we believe about the people that we know. Because when you're subverting those beliefs, that's when people get really afraid. And I really enjoy exploring that, tapping into the things that people are really afraid of. I think for me, I really enjoy writing queer horror specifically because queer characters are so often side characters in horror, people who are the victims of the horror plots. And that can be really tough to see because, you want to see yourself as the protagonist of a story, but also I think that it can tend to sort of make this martyr arc out of queer characters. And I always want to see queer characters at the center of the story, making their own decisions, fighting off the things that they're afraid of versus becoming victims of them always, because that's not, it's not always a nuanced take, and it's not something that is particularly uplifting to queer readers.
Agreed. Yes. We are very grateful that you're out here writing queer horror. We need more of it. Okay. So Sylvie asked, how do you come up with such good titles right from the start? Echo Sunset is such a good title.
Thank you very much. It's funny because I don't really come up with them right from the start. The Dead in the Dark didn't have its title until I sent my first query, and I just picked a random chapter title that I thought would fit the content of the book best, and it somehow didn't change over the entire course of that. But until then, it was the Untitled Lesbian Ghost Hunters Project, so probably would have been just as good of a title. For Echo Sunset, I really struggled with naming this one as well. I wanted to get at the unsettling feeling in the town, and I ended up, without going into spoilers for the book, there is a moment later on in the text when they are reading their mother's writing, and there's a line that uses the phrase Echo Sunset that I felt really summed up what the book was trying to say. And when I sort of said it out loud, I was like, oh, that's a great title for the book as well. And it's really stuck from there. And I really can't imagine it being called anything else at this point.
It really is a good title. Echo Sunset. I love it. I can't wait to see the cover too.
Me too.
soon we hope.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's still it's going through the works at the moment. So updates definitely to come.
Okay. And we love the Dead in the Dark's cover. I think it is universally agreed upon.
Like, I just stare at it every day.
Lottery.
I know. I remember when so Carrie Resnick was the designer of the cover and Peter Strain was the illustrator. And I remember I got the email from my editor saying that Carrie had found an illustrator that she felt would be a good fit for the cover, and they sent over some of his art, and I was mind blown because I could not believe that this was going to be the person doing my cover. And when the sketch came through, I really thought I was dreaming. It is just the most beautiful cover. And you've got I'm backwards. Logan and Ashley. And you can see a little cabin right at the bottom.
It's so good. And the purple is so pretty. It's
and
so
matching.
Good. Yeah. I told my editor, I said, for my third cover for The Restless Dark, I want it to be like this. And I immediately was like, this is Courtney's cover. Don't give me the same thing, but give me something as good, please.
Scary illustrated sapphic covers from here on out, always.
Yes.
And that'll just be the rule.
Absolutely agreed. Okay.
Oh, the horse girl wispies. Yes, Ashley has some classic horse girl wispies.
That is excellent. Okay. One of the audience members asked, do you have any advice for readers who haven't read horror before? I'm a little worried about being too scared while reading.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for The Dead in the Dark, I consider it not horror light so much, but I do think that most of the scares come from more internal stakes, things where you're just afraid something's going to happen. But I'm not a person who enjoys writing things that are really gory or really shocking just for the sake of getting a shocked reaction. I think for a lot of horror, what I would say for readers who are new to it, horror really relies on building up suspense for a pretty long period of time until you're really, really anxious about what's going to happen, and then delivering that big blow. So it feels like it has so much more impact, which I think can be really satisfying in a book form, because with a movie or with a video game or anything else horror, you're sort of along for the ride no matter what. But when you're reading, it's very, I think, self-navigated. You have to, deliberately read each page and get yourself to that big twist. And I think that can make it more satisfying, but also you can keep it in your own control a little bit more. So if you're feeling like you're getting really swept away with the scary factor of it, then you can totally put the book down, go take a walk, go look at the sun because it's not actually dark and scary out, and come back to it when you're feeling more at peace with what you're reading, versus other media where you don't really have that option.
I think that's really good advice for dipping your toes into horror if you're not much of a horror reader. And I think readers don't need to be afraid of this book. Like, it does have some scary stuff in it, but as someone who does, reads a little more scary stuff than the average person, I think it's manageable and doable. So don't be afraid. Yeah. Okay, so we are. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't want to put anyone off of reading horror forever. I think that the scares are far between, and they'll always have a payoff in the end. I promise.
Definitely. Absolutely. So we are running out of time. We're almost at the end of our hour. So I'm wondering, are there any recent or upcoming YA releases, especially queer YA releases, that you would like to shout about?
Well, there was this one, and I don't really remember the author's name, but it was about these two girls, and they were in the South, and they are trying to investigate a missing sister and a malicious mother figure, and it is Erica Waters' The River Has Teeth, which I was absolutely obsessed with. I love it. It has another enemies to lovers plot line. It has this really, really angry protagonist, and I feel like the atmosphere was just dripping off the page. So I feel like if I had to shout one out right off the top of my head, it would be The River Has Teeth. Let me look over here. I think some other ones that I have read recently that I really loved. So I know Trouble Girls came out recently, which was not so much horror. It was a thriller, but it's like a Thelma and Louise retelling. It's super fast paced, and it is a really, really, there's no chapter titles or no chapter breaks, where it just feels like it's one sort of fever dream trip. And I think that is a really, really cool title that has come out recently, and it's also Wednesday Books. Let's see. I really loved Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. That came out a bit ago, and that one I think is sort of a staple for the queer horror genre in YA.
Yeah.
It is so fantastic. It has this girl who's arriving at Saukhill Rock after the death of her father, and it's told from the point of view of these three girls who are all sort of connected to this mystery of a series of missing teen girls. And the further they get into the history of the town and their own relationships to the community there, the darker it gets. And I think that it is just a fabulous story, and I think about it all the time as sort of an inspiration for what The Dead in the Dark became. Let's see. I've got like all of my recent books next to me, so I'm just looking at them now. I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet, but I've heard that Sorrowland by River Solomon is both queer and very scary, and it has a fabulous cover. Let's take a look at that. It is really, really fantastic looking. And I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet, but I do have a copy of it, and I'm very excited to dig in. Let's take a look here. One that I've started was Forest of Stolen Girls. I don't think so. That one's not queer that I know of, but Forest of Stolen Girls by June Her is sort of this historic horror thriller set in Korea, where this girl wakes up and is having to investigate the rest of the girls she was with have gone missing. And now when her father returned to the scene to investigate further, he's gone missing as well. So she has to reconfront this trauma that she went through and sort of get to the bottom of it. And it's very, very spooky. Very, it's got a really, really unique atmosphere that I don't think a lot of YA has tapped into. And I think that it just makes it so unique and so interesting.
Yeah, I haven't read that one yet, but I read her last book, The Silence of Bones. Did
Oh,
you
yeah?
read that one? That one was
I didn't get to read that
so
one.
good. Really beautiful.
Oh.
Highly recommend it.
Okay, I'll have to do that because her writing is gorgeous.
Yes.
I'll have to do that. Another one that I'm actually speaking with Emma Berquist tomorrow, but she wrote Missing Presumed Dead, which I am obsessed with. I love it so much. It's about this girl who is able to see when she touches someone, she can see how they're going to die. And one night she works at this club, and one night she leaves, she touches this girl and she sees she's going to die that night, but she knows she's not able to prevent deaths even if she sees them. And so she lets it go. But the next day when she returns, the girl has come back as a ghost and is wanting to figure out what happened to her. And so now this main character has an obligation to help this ghost girl figure out who killed her because she didn't stop her from dying. And it is a sapphic romance, and it is really incredible. I read it in like one day. I loved it so much.
That sounds really, really good. Well, thank you for sharing those. So we are on our way out. We're about to hand the reins back over to Tubby and Coos. So final question for you. What do you hope readers will take away from your book when they close the book, they've looked at the last page? What do you hope they carry away from your story with them?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, I would love to have people really examine the place that they're from, the people that they're around, and the sort of pattern that they've fallen into. Think really hard about the people that lifestyle excludes or the people that it includes. Because I think the thing about The Dead in the Dark is that without going too much into spoilers, the big bad and all of the horrible things that happen leading up to the climax of the book were preventable if the people in town had taken the time to use empathy and to understand the difference in lifestyle of another person. And that can be a tough thing to do when you feel very connected to the space that you're in, and it can be hard to really examine your own biases and the things that you allow to happen for the comfort of having a place that you call home. But I think if my readers were able to really interrogate that feeling and think very critically about the world that they live in, and were able to make sure that sort of hatred and that bigotry and that need to exclude the people that we don't understand if they were able to weed that out, that would be something that I would be really happy about.
Absolutely. That's so good. So The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould, out today. Please go out and buy this immediately. It is an excellent, wonderful, beautiful book that I will be shouting about to absolutely everybody that I know. And of course, please get it from your local indie bookstore, more specifically from our wonderful, wonderful host, Hubby and Coos. And thanks so much, Courtney. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Erica. And make sure that you also buy The River Has Teeth, which came out on the 27th of July. It's incredible, and I love it so much. And also Erica's first book, Ghost Wood Song, which is one of my favorites of all time, is also available. And if you wanted to purchase that from Tubby and Coos, that would be even better.
That's what I was coming to say, is buy books from us, hopefully, if you're watching this. But hopefully, if not us, an indie bookstore, your local indie, you can purchase from us. We do have signed book plates from Courtney. So if you want a signed book, you can order one from us and you will get one. And thank y'all so much. This was such a great conversation. I enjoyed all of it. We had such an active audience. So thank y'all very much for watching and asking questions. This was amazing. And congratulations to Courtney and Erica both on your new books. Yay.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for hosting. This was really fabulous. I appreciate it so much.
So much fun. And everyone is saying, I'm just letting y'all know that we have a lot of like congratulations and people saying how fantastic you are. It was sold out.
Oh my gosh.
So everyone is very proud of you. And
thank you so much.
I just wanted to show you that everyone is really happy for you and for this book.
I appreciate that so much. And thank you to everybody who asked questions.
Yay. Yes, please, because it's always hit or miss with Q&A. So I love when we have an active audience who's asking a lot of questions. So thank you, Erica, for doing this, moderating the conversation too. And we will catch y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.